way to spend what a great way to spend our Monday. These are all the overachievers here, kicking off the Monday strong. Super excited for this week. This is the first of many sessions, so make sure you sign up for Leland if you haven't already. Erica will be dropping links in the chat. Also, make sure you join our Slack community, which is where we're going to be dropping a bunch of resources, recordings, questions. All of these coaches and more are in that Slack community. So it's a great way for us to continue the conversation rather than doing Zoom chat where it kind of dies after the event. So make sure you do that while we're getting going. We're gonna go through just a few logistics here. So welcome to GMAT GRE week. We're gonna cover a bunch of stuff. I will say this session is going to be kind of higher level, talking with some of these expert test prep tutors and experts around how to think about studying, some of the details, how should you approach the GMAT and the GRE. But we have a ton of very tactical sessions. Frankly, like you would pay thousands of dollars to access this through lots of the test prep companies that exist. It's going to be completely free this whole week. So super excited that we can do that. Thanks to these amazing tutors here. We also are going to send out a bunch of free resources, and that will go in Slack. So make sure you join again. Erica has the link in the chat here, and a bunch of resources for not only GMAT GRE but also some of the other grad school stuff that many of you are probably thinking about. So take advantage of it. Super excited about that. This is going to be a great week. Here's just a quick overview of the lineup we have. So today is the kickoff, and then we have one more event. But then Tuesday through Thursday, it's just jam-packed with very specific events. So some things about the GRE, and we'll talk about a little bit tonight around the difference between those two and how you should think about picking one. And then some other like specific things like crushing GRE vocab, others that are more like, GMAT reading comprehension, quant stuff, things like integer properties, different question types that are super important. So make sure you go and register for these individually because they will send you unique Zoom links and calendar holds. You can register for them all. You'll get the recordings later, but you'll get a bunch of free stuff in the session itself. So I encourage you to join live for those. And Erica dropped the link there that lists all of them for the week. Make sure you go and do that. And again, many of these will be more tactical in nature, which I think can be super valuable. And tonight will be some tactical stuff, but definitely an overview of things. So super excited for the week. This is going to be great. And again, make sure you join the Slack. We will keep dropping. I know we're almost at 180 of you now. We'll keep dropping some of these links so that people can access those. But join the Slack. That's where we're going to ask or answer and ask a lot of the questions. Okay. We're excited to have you here. These are some of we've talked about a lot of these. So make sure you sign up for Leland for the Slack. This is the overview we have, or the agenda we have for tonight. We're going to do some quick introductions. We'll tell you a little bit about Leland. Many of you are probably encountering us for the first time. Most of the session, though, is going to be on the GMAT and the GRE, hearing from these experts and their takes on what to do and how to navigate the test. I'm John. I'm the CEO of Leland. I took the GMAT. It was a dark time in my life, but it was great. Got it done, and thankfully got into Harvard and Stanford, and now have founded Leland and have some amazing team members that you will see both in email and in the chat. Big thanks to them for coordinating a lot of this. These events take a lot of work, and so we're grateful for them. And I want to take a second to intro our panelists. I'm actually going to kick it to them for them to give their intros, but we're so lucky to have such talented panelists, especially tonight, but really throughout this entire week. So I'll kick it to you, Marie, for a quick intro, and then to Kat, and then to Nick.
Hi, well, my name is Marie. I have been doing test prep or teaching people in some sort, mostly SAT and ACT for over 15 years now. I started with SAT and ACT. I was a high school math teacher. I have a graduate degree from Columbia in math education, an undergrad degree from Georgetown in English literature. And I always taught people tests. 7 years ago, I started teaching GMAT and GRE full time. I've been working with Leland for about 2 or 3 years now. And I do this full time. I don't really think that I stick to any one curriculum. I feel that I worked with Kaplan and I I don't really like it that much. I feel like that I've culled and curated a lot of my own resources. I have subscriptions to a lot of different programs like Target Test Prep and Magoosh, and I use GMAT Club and official guide materials. But basically, I try to bring it all together and give my students like a well-rounded what I've noticed. And well, I mean, I've been behind the curtain of developing the curriculum. Like I know how they did that in Kaplan. So basically, I developed my own one that's pretty regimented and structured so that, for my students. And I'm going to be teaching a class on Thursday, the integer properties class, which is sort of like a beginning, what my first lesson looks like, but it's about maybe say 40% of it because, well, I'm teaching to a lot of people and it's a pretty hard lesson. So I would love for you guys to sign up for that. And you can see a little bit more about what it looks like when I really teach.
Thanks, Marie. Take it away, Kat.
Hi, I'm Kat. It's really nice to be here with all of you. I am a GRE teacher. I have been doing GRE for 8 years. I've been in the admission space in one way or another. It was actually my very first job in college, so for about 20 years now. I'm also a fiction writer and I do writing coaching, kind of life coaching stuff as well as GRE.
Recording in progress.
Built an asynchronous GRE course for Manhattan Prep, GRE Interact. I've built vocabulary series for them. I've built curricula. So I've spent a long time with this test and I've come to specialize particularly in working with students who have hit a wall. So right now, a lot of what I do is long-term tutoring relationships with folks who've really had significant trouble with some aspect of this test. And so a lot of what I am thinking about in my work these days is habit change, narrative change, study skills, because every time I have a student come to me and say, I've taken classes, I've been at this for a while and I'm not where I want to be, almost always the intervention has to do with their study habits. So that's become a big focus of my teaching practice. And that's the course I'm going to share tomorrow is, I think, the 3 things that I most want to communicate to GRE students, whether you're new or you've been at this for a while, based on just observation and iteration with, at this point, hundreds of students. So, hope to see you there if you're doing GRE.
Great. Thank you, Kat. Go for it, Nick.
Hey all, I'm Nick Van Sloten. I am just a year and a half out of your shoes. I just took the GMAT a year and a half ago, and scored a 760 on my first exam, ended up scoring a 790 on a subsequent exam. And after that, I felt like I had a strong desire to give back and to share what I learned and share the skills and knowledge that I gained with others who are in the throes of the GMAT and GMAT prep. And so I'm just excited. I was just thinking about the fact that there's probably at least one, if not several of you out there who could be panelists on this call next year. You could be right where I'm at, becoming GMAT experts right here by working with these great people. So I put my MBA dreams on hold after my startup got accepted to Y Combinator. But I have loved being a part of Leland and tutoring and mentoring people like yourselves to achieve their goals and get to accomplish their dreams through the GMAT. So excited to meet all of you, especially at my session on Wednesday. I'll be talking specifically about sentence correction and the old GMAT versus the new GMAT. We'll allude to that later in the presentation, but I guess the reason why I focus on that and focus on verbal is because I noticed that so many people tell me, especially international students, but people from all over share that they feel like they've got math down and verbal just isn't quite getting there. And so my focus is helping people to make verbal more like math.
That's awesome. Thank you. Again, super lucky to have all 3 of you. Thank you for being here. We're at over 200 people. And this is going to be a great session. So let's jump in. And again, Erica dropped in their profile links, reach out to them. They're all very busy and will book up. So definitely encourage you to reach out to them and check out some of the packages. We'd also love to get to know you. So Erica is going to drop a prompt in the chat in Slack. If you haven't joined the Slack yet, make sure you do that. But would love to hear, where are you dialing in from, where are you working / studying, and then what's your dream grad program? It always helps us to just get to know you a little bit. And make sure you do that in Slack so we can get to know you a little bit. We'll give you just a second. We're getting some people. We got Arkansas, DC. We got some Utah, SF, Berkeley, France. Very nice. Love that. Mexico. This is great. Okay. Where are you working? And if you don't mind dropping it in the thread, that would be best. And again, this is in Slack. So if you're not in Slack yet, it looks like we're getting a lot of people in there. So perfect. Okay. We're going to keep going while you fill these in. But it's fun to see so many people. We got Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto. We got Sao Paulo. This is awesome. Okay. Let's keep going. Good to see some life in there. Again, if you have questions as we go through this, drop it in Slack. We will get to it. If we don't get to it today, we'll get to it later. But we'll make sure your questions get answered. Sometimes when we were doing the questions in Zoom, we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. I think this will be a great way for us to do that. So just to give you a quick overview of Leland, we help thousands of people take really hard tests and apply to really competitive schools and jobs every single year, and really every single month at this point. So these are some of the faces of the real people that have gotten into these amazing schools in like the last year or so. And we really hope that you're next. We hope that you're working with these amazing tutors to get the scores that you want. We hope you're applying to ambitious schools that you thought maybe you never had a shot at. We're here to help at every stage. So make sure that we could probably fill like 10 slides of these, which is by far the best part of this job, is seeing all these people reach their goals. And I'm sure I could go through each of these panelists and they would tell you their success stories of people reaching these like kind of breaking through these walls of a barrier they thought was too hard to break through as a test taker or even as a school. So anyways, that's Leland. In a nutshell, we provide one-on-one coaching or tutoring, group classes, and then content. So we have a new product called Leland Plus that gives you example essays, resumes, guides, cover letters, video content. And that's for both MBA and for other career paths and other things. And we're constantly building out more. We still haven't launched our GMAT and GRE track, but make sure you sign up for that. There's a free trial for it, and it's really affordable, $10 per month. So definitely take advantage of that. We try to provide all these resources in as low cost of way as possible. And we do events like this all the time. All right. So yes, and you will be able to access the recordings too. There's been some questions, but it might take a second. So definitely stay on live. So let's talk through some of the details here of GRE, GMAT, and the new changes. And I'm actually going to kick it to a couple of our experts to talk through stuff in more detail. But the short answer on the GRE is that the test has changed. So there's no like two versions of the test. It's now the new test. Kat, anything you would add on the GRE?
It's so much better. I've had a handful of students take it, and mostly folks are doing, a couple points above, just without any additional prep, a couple points above how they were scoring on the longer test. So I think it's good news that it's shorter, and the new test is a good fit. Scores are a little more volatile because there's fewer questions, and small errors are a bigger deal. Important to think about in preparing. Yeah,
that's great. Okay, so then the GMAT, and I'll kick it to you, Nick, to give us some more info on this. It sounds like, so the GMAT's a little bit trickier because some schools right now are saying we only accept the GMAT through round 2. So if you're applying in January and you're still knocking out the GMAT, this is specifically for MBA programs I'm referring to. Many schools, most schools are saying still take the old GMAT. However, next year, things are changing and the GMAT focus will be the primary test. The old GMAT will be phasing out. Nick, anything you'd add on the new test, how to think about it?
Yeah, absolutely. A couple major changes. The On the quant side of the GMAT, the data sufficiency questions, which are often hated on, are gone, and they're replaced with data insights, which are still somewhat similar to. There are some of those questions that are similar to data sufficiency, some that are similar to the integrated reasoning of the old GMAT. And then on the verbal side, they completely remove the sentence correction questions. And my hot take is that sentence correction is actually, on average, easier, especially for people who have a more analytical focus. They're better at math. I think that sentence correction is easier than the other types of questions on verbal. And so, if that's you, my suggestion would be to take the GMAT Classic before it phases out, and that score will still be good at all of the schools that you're applying to, at least as far as we know. So come to my session on Wednesday night and learn more about that. But everyone's strengths are different. The two tests, which you'll perform on better, will be different. But we'd love to talk more about that.
That's great. Super helpful. And again, I would definitely, if you are wondering which one to take and when the deadlines are, look at the school's websites that you're applying to. They're going to have the most up to date. They're releasing new information all the time. So we'll give you our up to date perspective on it, but always best for things that are more, tactical in nature, like which test can I submit and when can I submit it by. Definitely encourage you to just look at the school website for that. Okay. Let's just throw in a question. Erica, do you mind dropping it in the chat? I'd love to know which part of the GMAT or the GRE feels the most daunting. This could be, studying. This could be overcoming test prep, test anxiety. This could be a specific type of question. I'm curious to drop it in. Erica just dropped it in the chat. Feel free to throw it in there. We'll see how much of that we can cover. If you don't mind dropping it in the thread, that'd be great. Quant, okay. Some votes for quant so far. Everyone else is just stressed
I'm going to answer
generally.
the question for everyone. It's number properties and it's probability and combinations. That's pretty much what everyone says. Probability and number properties, integer properties, number properties. Those things usually go hand in hand.
Yeah. We also had some just general, like where do I even start? Like what should I even do to tackle this test? We'll get to some of that. How long to study? Great. These are some good questions. All right, we're going to turn it over to our expert panel. We have about 23 minutes, and I think it's a great question to start on. How should students start studying for the GMAT or the GRE? Marie, I'll kick it to you for this one, and then we'll move on from there. How should people start?
Okay, so when I start with the student, if they have, sometimes people are working in jobs like private equity, or they just have no time, and they can only meet once a week. But in my ideal is to meet twice a week, 2 hours a session. So 4 hours a week, you're looking at 16 hours a month, and it's going to take 3 months. I feel like that kind of really, I've had other people who have come to me and they are at a 680, and then we'll probably do about 24 to 36 hours, depending on how far they're shooting. And sometimes, a student like that, I had a student this year get a 780, and I'm always going to brag about that because that's a great score. But basically, if I'm starting from the beginning, I say, give yourself 3 months, maybe a little longer, because that's 16 hours. And my hope is that you are working 2 hours a day outside of what I'm doing, because I'm going to meet you twice a week on a Monday and a Thursday, something like that. You're going to be taking tests every weekend. Sometimes you're going to have to take 2. And then I will tell you this, I really don't think it's realistic to think that you can be really ready for this test unless you have taken 14 to 20 practice tests. Sometimes you buy a package of 6 and you take 6 and you'll retake those 6. And then I usually do that before I put people on official tests, so that, that we don't use up all the official ones and before we really know what that looks like. And then sometimes people will take a test and the nerves get to them, or a little timing, like the student who had a 780. She was averaging around a 740, anything from her 720 to a 770 were her last four scores. She got a 720 when she really took it. She took it 2 weeks later and then got the 780. And that sometimes happens. She's like, my timing was off. So give yourself 3.5, 4 months. And if you're
Yeah, that's
here,
great.
if you're really looking at either for like next year, or you're a deferred candidate, I'm just going to say, give yourself a pat on the back for being proactive. This is a good time.
That's great. Kat, maybe I'll kick it over to you. Anything else that you'd add in terms of like building out a plan or how to attack this that you'd recommend, or that you do with your students?
Yeah, I think one big thing that kind of builds on what Marie was talking about is just the importance of consistency of practice. I really want my students to be sitting down to do this 6 days a week without fail. Even if that means they have to do slightly shorter sessions in a day. And so really sitting down with yourself and thinking about what do you need to commit to and move around in your life to clear that space and to find that consistent time. It's not an easy task, because everyone I work with, has a demanding job and a demanding life, and it's hard to fit that in. But that, I think, is one of the most important things starting out, is to make that commitment to daily practice and to work with yourself or to work with a coach to figure out how to stay with that commitment.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I'm gonna move to the next question here, and I'll open it up to any coaches that want to talk through some of the key differences. I think one of the biggest questions we hear all the time, especially for MBA applicants, obviously, is which of these tests should I take? And is the GMAT the business school test, or is it okay to take the GRE? Lots of questions around this. I'll answer the first part, which is it does not matter which one you choose to take for the business school itself. They do not care. They will accept both. The Dean of Admissions have said this many times. And in many ways, the GRE is growing in popularity because it suits certain types of test takers. So pick the test you're going to do the best on. Don't die on one hill because you think it's the test that needs to be taken. Pick the test that you're going to do best on. But I guess I'm going to open it up to coaches. As you think about which one does suit your strengths, how should you evaluate this decision? Nick, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this first, and then we can open it up to the others.
Yeah, I never took the GRE, so I don't have a good point of comparison. But I will say that I think taking a little bit of time to actually determine what are your skills, what skill set do you bring, and then B, dipping your toes into the exams. I'll actually send out a link to there's a MBA GMAT mini quiz it's just 8 questions, a very brief snapshot of the GMAT, but I think it's a great way to see what does that look like, and is that something that I could do.
Yeah, that's great. Marie or Kat, do either of you have an opinion on this and how to think about the decision, which one to take? Which types of test takers may do better on one or the other?
Kat, do you want me to take it? I mean, I know that you
Go for it.
GREs, and I do a little bit of both. Look, I think I favor a little bit the GMAT, but that's a personal thing. And I've noticed that students who really seem to dislike math would rather take the GRE. It's hard now to say it, because I used to be like, would you prefer to learn vocabulary, or would you prefer sentence correction? Like that was just pretty much the choice. But now there is no sentence correction. And just like Nick said, like, even though this is going away, people are like, yay. But then I'm like, well, now you're going to have more reading comprehension, and you're going to have more critical reasoning. Critical reasoning is something that I taught a lot when I taught LSAT. That's not easy to just become a whiz at. And I really can't say. The one thing that's manageable about vocabulary is it seems like it's a lot of memorization, but memorization is doable if you have to have a plan, you have to have, a structure. I mean, that's, between you and your coach and how you figure that out. I do certain things to like keep track of my students, and, keep them accountable for like memorizing lists and things like that before I get into the technique. Generally speaking, my answer is if you favor verbal, go with GRE, but that's so general. That's so general. I'm taking a stance.
Yeah, go for it, Kat. I'm sure if you have
I'm
something.
the opposite of Marie. I have taken GMAT and GRE and LSAT, and the GRE is the one that I connect with most. And I think it's probably is because I'm more of a verbal person. I also find I think the GRE is a little bit better for folks dealing with test anxiety because it's you can move around within the sections. It's not question adaptive like the GMAT, and I think that makes the timing strategy a little easier to manage for folks who are working with anxiety in my experience.
But they're changing that for the focus.
As I was saying that,
Yeah.
I was like, I bet this is going to change. I'm going to have to rethink this.
Yeah, I heard that, well, I just like saw yesterday that you have 3 that you can go back, but I thought that you could have 5 that you could go back. So
Yeah.
I'm not even sure. But for people who don't know, like the GRE, there are 2 sections, and the first section sort of like a wide range. And if you do really well on it, then your second section's harder. And yeah, you can go back and forth, but if you do average on it, you get a moderate or a lower, so if your second section feels really easy, that's not so great. And if it feels really hard, that's good. So, that's not the way it's going to work on the GMAT. They're judging you sort of like by every question. And yeah, you only have a couple, 3 or 5. I still don't know because every day seems something's different. But yeah. So by the way, the answer is there's no answer.
Yeah. I think the answer is, yeah, I mean, figure out how to dip your toes into both. And I think that thanks for shining that in Slack, Nick, the mini quiz. I think there's certain strengths. We certainly, I will say as a company, we tend to see very quantitative backgrounds and international students that have really strong quantitative training do better on average on the GMAT. And folks, even if you consider yourself like, someone that enjoys math, if you don't have like a really rigorous math training in your education or background, oftentimes the GRE, which is still a challenging test, could be a better fit. So that's what we see. All right, so let's go through some of the common challenges that test takers face during their preparation for this test. And Kat, I'll start with you. And I know you mentioned consistency, but I'm curious other challenges that you see people face as they're preparing for the GRE with you.
I think a big challenge is trying to get too much to happen too soon. I think especially for students who need quant foundation work, which I find is a lot of the students I work with coming to GRE, having enough time to set a solid foundation untimed and be able to acquire the sort of core math skills. Drilling with math mechanics is something that I see people often don't do enough of, in sometimes a rush to get into the timed problem solving, and then introducing time too soon can make a lot of things get worse. So I think some patience in terms of saying, I'm going to set this foundation untimed, I'm going to acquire the math, I'm going to take some time for that, and then to bring in timing a little bit later. I find especially works well for those who are worried about the math or who haven't done math in a while.
That's great. Nick or Marie, I'll open it up to either one of you. Are there any challenges that you see pop up often in folks' preparation?
For me, I think that I always show students, I like to show students records of like when it went well, to just show them that there's a lot of plateaus. And there's a lot of times when people really hit like, am I ever getting better? And maybe that's a little bit why I favor the GMAT, because the GRE is just like 1 point. And sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I've gotten the same score like 6 tests in a row. And then you have a breakthrough. And then there's these moments and then you're like, yay. And then it goes up and then it plateaus again. And I think that's why I show like records of all these other students who have succeeded. And I'm like, even Sarah had like a moment where she was like, is this ever even getting better? So it's sort of, I think that like what I offer people is a lot of like know-how and support that I've seen this before. We will get through it because I always get through it, and it, we push this along, but it's psychologically, it's going to mess with your head. You know, that's why we're all saying you need enough time, because it's really hard to, it doesn't, it's very, I've never seen anyone just straight go up, take the test and boom, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't want to say never, but I'm hoping, you know, but everyone, hard.
So I took a test cold, and I got, it was genuinely cold. I was like, I'm just gonna go see what my starting point is. And then I studied for 3 weeks and I did worse. And I was like, what? And I think it was because I was trying to solve every problem. So I ran out of time. Versus like, the first test I was like, don't know how to do that. I'll just send it and then move on to the next thing. Which ended up being a better finish. But yeah, it messes with you. And I think you have to, I think I'm sure a large part of having a tutor and someone that can help you is just to kind of push you through that and say, here's some of the tactics you can use to break through that wall. Nick, I'll kick it over to you. I know you had something to add.
Totally. Yeah. My brief 2 cents is that most people, especially I'm sure the high achievers on this call, are used to completely solving a problem. They're used to getting the answer and being 100% sure that it's correct every time. And in the GMAT GRE, I'm sure as well, timed environment, there are changes that you need to make. You will not linearly solve problems every time. You will work backwards a lot of the time. You will you'll reframe the way that you look at problems, and there is a good deal of maximum likelihood estimation that goes on as well. And so you need to be able to kind of unbend your mind, unbend your pride in a sense, and solve problems in a different way. And I think that is one reason it's really helpful to work with a tutor who can show you how to solve problems differently than you have.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so let's talk through some resources. And maybe when you work with clients, are you building out like a timeline or a study plan, or what are some of the resources that you recommend? Marie, you've mentioned some of the earlier that you subscribe to personally and have for clients. Nick, maybe I'll kick it over to you. And I know you have kind of the 0 to hero package. What are you doing when you work with people that are just getting going? Like what are some of these resources? And I'll start with you and then we can move on to the other panelists.
Absolutely. Great question. Well, I have a set of resources that I share with clients. I, again, focus mostly on verbal. And so a lot of things related to sentence correction. I have a big set of Google Docs that goes through a lot of the most common mistakes, shows examples, that type of thing. And I think seeing things in the wild is the most helpful way to study. And so I actually push my clients to spend the vast majority of their time doing practice problems. I think that is by far the most effective, and studies have shown this. My clients' experience has shown this, that practice problems and taking tests is actually a more effective way to spend time, not in 100% of the time, but for the 80-20, than just pure study. So I spend a lot of time working with clients through practice exams, encourage them to work through practice questions. We get lists of practice questions and go through them, and I'll analyze their performance and see how they're doing on different types of questions, trying to understand what are the underlying threads in their strengths and weaknesses. And so all that to say, take practice tests, take practice problems, and then the resources that I give my clients are all driving towards getting them real world or example problems to develop those skills that they need.
Great. Kat, anything else that you'd recommend that you provide for your clients or recommend to your clients?
Yeah, I think I might work a little differently. I only take usually 3 to 5 students at a time, and I do very custom work for each of them. So my path through to each student usually is pretty unique. I really love, and I do work for Manhattan Prep a little bit, so that's my disclaimer, but I do really love the free prep hour archives that Manhattan Prep has on YouTube, because they cover everything, like any topic you want, it's in there at least once, and they're free. And I've made like a database, kind of an organizational database of those that I use with my clients. And then last thing to sort of piggyback on something Nick said is I think doing problems super important, and then also how you review problems. So I spend a lot of time also on, as I'm sure all of us do, on review techniques. That's often when folks feel like they've done a high volume of practice and haven't seen the improvement they want. Often it's something in how they're reviewing or thinking about the problems that needs adjusting.
Yeah, that's great. Super helpful. Maria, I'm going to kick this one over to you, just in the interest of time. How important are practice tests? You mentioned a lot of practice tests that I'm sure some people
Yeah.
are, how am I going to fit in all of these? When should they start? How should you think about practice tests?
I like working for test companies. We always like to give you one in the very beginning. And it's sort of so at the very end, we go, look how great you've done. I'm not really totally about that. I really kind of, start them off and then I teach them some stuff. And then when I feel like they're getting a little lazy, like maybe after I have a student today who didn't do her homework, and I'm like, you're going to take a practice test pretty soon because now because I want, you
The
want
day
to
of
punch in
reckoning.
the face, punch in the gut, whatever it is to see that like you're not learning as much as you think. And you need like a little bit of a, but I really actually like to teach a lot of stuff before. And then I know that they're going to do kind of like what you did. They're going to screw up because they're going to try so many problems and they're going to run out of time. But then it's sort of just a reality check. I went through a thing about a year and a half ago where I had like a couple students and I was really in a lull because they were all sort of just like middling around the 650, and they were, there was like three of them all at the same time. Things always happen in threes. And then I spent a lot of time on Reddit and going on like those chats. And I saw someone like a test prep said, I took 20 tests before, a tutor from a leading company. He's like, I took 20 tests. And I was like, yeah, I got to like bring this back in because it's really, you can't, I want my students to get 4 scores above or right where they're looking before they go into the real thing. And usually, I don't want to say usually, but like 50-50, they will not want to take it again. So
Yeah, that's good to hear that you want to start taking tests and scoring in the range that you want to score, because on test day it's rare that you're going to have some Hail Mary 30-point gap where it's like all of a sudden I did so much better than I'd been practicing. That's great. We're gonna keep moving, but I'm curious, in the world of in-person and online testing, and I know this, there's different areas where you can, or this is accepted or not, and there's test availabilities. But in a world where I can choose, does anyone feel strongly about this question?
I'm going to answer something. Okay, like, I don't know, that everyone's different. For me, I would definitely want to be in a center. I like the pressure, and that environment like kind of makes me alert, but everyone's different. So some people are not going to work like that. What's more important though, I think, and I just want to speak to the GMAT, and if the rules have changed since yesterday, I apologize, but you can take a test in the center, and then you can take your next test has to be something like 16 days later, but you could take a test in the center and then take one at home the next day. Now, that student I mentioned who got the 720 and was disappointed with it, she tried to schedule one for the next day at home, but there were no proctors available. So sometimes, and I've now brought that up, I have students who have one scheduled in the center, one scheduled at home a week later, and then so that they can, if the first one doesn't go well, then they can hypothetically schedule the others. It's pretty easy to reschedule them and not have a cost to that. But I just want to if anyone's here who's like, kind of, I hate to say, like a last minute round 2 person, you should be thinking about this if you need to take it, say 3 times. You can also only take it 5 times in a calendar year, and you can only take it 2 times at home maximum in your life, I think. That's a COVID thing that came out that still exists. I don't know if those rules apply exactly to the GRE, so.
Yeah.
GRE, there isn't a cap on how many times you can take it online. You can, but also same cap 5 times in a calendar year, and you have to leave 21 days between tests, which is also really important if you're thinking about GRE for round 2 deadlines. Budget to take it more than once if you can, and factor in that 21-day spacing.
That's great. Nick, we'll kick it over to you. Are there any other, we talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious if there's any other mistakes that you see in preparation, or even just in the test itself, that's common?
Great question. I think that one of the mistakes that I talk to my clients a lot about is taking the test in the same way that you did before you met me. And that often that people go back to their defaults in a test taking environment.
Yeah.
It's I'll spend this time, working with clients, and then they'll take a practice exam and say, oh, I got the same score as last time. And then I'll say, well, did you do this and this and this? And they're like, oh, actually, I didn't. And it really is that simple. You want to practice these tests, these problems, until your default becomes the right thing, until your default becomes the better way, rather than the way that you did things before you met with a tutor or had resources. So you've got it is volume. It's getting reps and doing the review, like Kat said. It's all critical.
Yeah. We're gonna move on to test day tips and tricks, which probably also corresponds with some of the mistakes. But Kat, anything you recommend? You wake up, what do you do? What's the trick?
Don't do anything you don't normally do. That's my big thing. Like, if you don't normally drink coffee, don't make that the day to have a coffee. And I think it's important to say, because I've had more than one student go down that road. And then do some
shotgun a Red Bull right before you walk in.
Oh no, I did have a student do that and then solve like 2 questions on the test. It was so bad. So that, do a couple warm-up problems. So the very first problem you're seeing in the day isn't the first official question.
That's good to hear.
I tell people to dress nicely. I have been using this one for like ever, but it's now, pardon my grammar here, but you look good, you feel good, you do good. Okay. So there's something about like feeling confident, couple power stances or whatever. And then I tell my students, just like, go in there and be like, I mean, if you see other people in the room, like, I'm smarter than everyone. If you don't feel that way, I'd be like, well, you had the best tutor. So you can at least be assured that that's true. But yeah, that's my thing. Try to dress well and don't overhydrate, because I did have a student who couldn't stop thinking about peeing.
Yeah, that's okay. That's great. So this is the first of many sessions. Again, make sure you register for the individual sessions if you have not done that. That's where you'll get the recordings and everything too. So make sure you register for those. Lots of people on this call. What's your final tip for them as they go into this week and start their test prep journey? Maybe Marie, will start with you, and then we'll go to Kat and then Nick.
I don't know. What's the question? What's my final tip that I have for test takers?
Sorry, you were answering.
Someone else take it.
You're answering Slack. Sorry, we're distracting you. Kat, we'll give it to you first. We'll go back.
Mine specifically for folks who are worried about the math. I still have nightmares about high school math. It's never been a strength. I don't like it, but I can do well at GRE math. And I've seen that be true for many, many folks who come to this test with serious math anxiety, bad past experiences, haven't done math in years. So absolutely something that can be worked through. And I've seen, really high GRE quant scores coming from students who showed up saying that they were terrible at math and would never get better. And they did.
Yeah, that's great. I like that a lot. All right, Marie, back to you, and then we'll go to Nick.
Well, okay. So I think I'm going to piggyback on that and just say that, like, when I have students, when sometimes I go, how do you feel about math? And if I go, how are your multiplication? If they go, the first thing I do is there's a bunch of apps. I'm happy to, if you guys want to know, like, which ones I've found, that I don't want my students doing multiplication tables, but I found some apps that are for division. And because I'm like, if you can do division, you can do multiplication. It's more important that you break down numbers. So I make students do division apps, and I make them text me. I'm working on the division app right now, so I can like give them a little heart, emoji. I'm like going to be your private cheerleader. I am a little bit like, I am a high school teacher, so in my heart. So I feel like I'm here to be your cheerleader. I'm also here, if you are procrastinating, I'm not going to, yell at you. We're going to figure out how to fix that. So, but I will say straight up, if if you want to know the apps, just message me. I will give you the specific ones that I've found. And if anyone here knows how to develop an app, like this is my dream for 15 years, to develop an app that will get people better at quant skills. I mean, the other two, I'm hearing verbal people, but I'm a math person who taught myself verbal, not vice versa. Or I don't want to, presume anything, but I see things, I feel like I turn math people into verbal because I'm like, oh, I do see this. There's like a right and wrong. Anyway, I think I answered that
great.
question.
That's great. Yeah, no, it's great. It's great to have different perspectives here. All right, Nick, bring us home. What's your final tip?
The one tip I would share is to recognize that with the GRE, with the GMAT, with any test, there is a universe of potential scores that you could get. There's an average, and there's highs and lows, there's outliers. And your goal is to shift that average higher. Now, the day of the test, there's going to be randomness. You are going to fall somewhere on that spectrum. Your goal in all of your study and work is to shift that average higher. And the way to then seize an outlier is to take the test several times, is to have more shots on goal to get that high side of the average. So I would take the test more than once unless you get that outlier on the early, in an early exam. But that's something I would think about.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all. Super helpful. Such good insights. I feel like I learned a lot about the GMAT and the GRE tonight. So thank you. We have some unique coupon codes that they've created, or classes that are coming up soon. So Kat has a class, how to study for the GRE, diagnosis and planning, coming up soon. Marie's giving out some discount codes for 25% off 6+ hours of coaching. And then Nick is giving out a discount code for 10% off any of his coaching services in November. So take advantage of that. We'll drop that both in the Slack and in the chat to make sure you have everything you need to be successful here. And make sure you join their free sessions this week to get to know them better. Really excited to have you this week and throughout your journey. We're here to help. We're here to cheer you on. I think Marie said it very well, which is we not only can come with expertise, but we're also here to cheer you on and be here for you emotionally and personally. And it sounds like Kat does that as a part of her coaching as well. So that's just great. This is a very holistic process. It's hard, it's challenging, it's scary, but it's also incredibly rewarding. So keep in touch. We're here to help you, and we're cheering for you. Thanks for being here. And thank you, panelists, again. Show some love for them in the Slack. It was great.
I have a bunch of people who signed up for stuff, so
yeah, great. Reach out to these coaches. They do free intro calls. You can get on their calendar. They'll book up. Hurry and do that. Thank you all.
Okay.
Take care.